when we say these things in front of kids, obviously we are making it a little more simple, but obviously all of those things are very complex. As Karen was reading the scriptures, I was like, I don't know how to make a sermon out of that, honestly. So much. There's so many different directions I could go in. But of course I have my Wonder Woman cup, so we'll make it work. Today's sermon is entitled Disruptive Blessing. And I think we can all agree that sermon title was chosen months ago and yet very, very fitting, right? That we are in disruptive times. Our world is not well in many ways, from global climate change to all the catastrophizing of weather, women who are in sports that are serious being laughed at the butt of a joke that heard around the world, right? Although that was sort of redeemed last night if you watched the cold open on SNL. Did anyone watch that? Yeah. The girls got back. That was fun. Geopolitics is violently troubling. We have had millions of pages of terrible deeds by rich men and women come out. In Kansas, a law was passed that stripped transgender folks of their basic human rights. And it turns out we are at war. We are at war. I begin my sermons usually on Monday and just had not anticipated that, right? But with what's going on currently in the world and how this administration is doing lots of things, it feels like even war is just another in a long line of terrible things that we're hearing or we're scrolling past, right? Is it just me, or does it feel like a lot? Like a lot of images, a lot of things happening that we're facing. And I think a lot of us are sort of tired, right? And so the question is, in the middle of all of this, with these teachings that we are understanding, how do we do good in the midst of all of that? Well, I think before we can do good, we have to get real, right? We have to look in the mirror, as James says, and not forget what we see. Look into a mirror and not forget what we see. We heard the letter to James. The early Christian church understood this sense of mirrors. And I did look it up. There were mirrors back then. There were actually glass mirrors, but they were less kind of available in the first century. Probably they would have been using mirrors that were some polished obsidian, some polished metal, probably polished silver, right? So we're not saying the kind of mirrors that honestly I need now is like one of those mirrors with like 10 times magnification. Am I the only one that never understood what those mirrors were for in a hotel room and now look for them in a hotel room? Like, oh, is that what my mascara looks like? You know? So for us, mirrors, maybe we have a different relationship with than the past, right? When mirrors weren't as readily available. There weren't big mirrors in bathrooms, even if bathrooms were places that people put on makeup at the time. But I think it's very interesting for us to capture this moment and think about what it is to lean into the imagery of mirrors. We all know mirrors are supposed to reflect the truth, reflect reality, right? And hopefully that reality is the truth. Sometimes I wonder, because I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like there's multiple realities happening, right? Multiple ways in which to view any given thing. And when I look in the mirror, I'm faced with the reality that I don't have purple eyes. I don't have blue hair, although I could get blue hair, but I don't think I would, right? A mirror forces me to face reality, right? Whatever that reality is. And a mirror ultimately is supposed to help us see ourselves as we truly are. This, of course, brought to mind a famous mirror. There's lots of famous mirrors. Probably before this one, my other famous mirror is the mirror you look at when you go through the haunted house ride at Disneyland. And what happens in that mirror? You may have a ghost coming home with you. As a kid, I thought that was amazing, and as an adult, I'm like, oh, that's just like projected light and stuff. But yeah, it was always very interesting to get to the end of the haunted house ride and see who was coming home with you. But the other mirror is, of course, from Grimm fairy tale, Snow White, which has been put into TV and movies, and Disney has taken it, obviously, the story on. We know from our childhood reading, with a little help, again, from Disney, that the queen has a magical mirror, right, that tells her the truth, or a version of the truth, and she likes to ask it. What does she like to ask it? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest? Who's the prettiest? Who's the best of them all? And the question I've always asked or wondered is, do you think she's asking because she's genuinely curious? Like, who could it be? Oh my goodness, who is the fairest? Like she was wondering, genuinely curious. No, of course not. She knows the answer, right? That she is the fairest of them all until when? Snow White grows up, right? Stepdaughter. There comes along with another truth, right? It's told from her precious mirror, who then at least we know is telling the truth, right? A truth she doesn't handle very well. Spurned on by jealousy and vanity, she seeks to destroy this new truth, which is a person, rather than open herself up to a new reality or sense of mystery. Now, when I was in college, we deconstructed this a bit in light of feminism. Why are we competing as women to be most beautiful? And that's for another sermon. But what I want us to focus on is this idea that we come to a place that will give us the truth, a mirror, and we ask it not out of curiosity, but we ask it to confirm our own biases, right? Anything that doesn't fit her truth must be what? Destroyed, right? False, must be wrong, right? How many times do you or I ask a question with genuinely outknowing the answer? Like, think about, genuinely, the last time you asked a question and you didn't have something ready to go as a response, or you didn't know the answer and the actual reason you're asking it is because you want to share your eloquence with the world, or the room at least, or the person, right? We rarely ask questions that we don't know the answers to. I mean, how often are we really curious? To me, that's, like, not to go back to it, but that's the catalyst for Small Talk Supper, that we will look around a table and ask questions we don't know the answers to. What do you think of this? Or what was your childhood like? For when our church council met, we did a little get-to-know-you game where we passed around pennies. For anyone under the age of 50, pennies are these things that we used to use to pay for things. I think they're going away, right? And everyone who got a penny, you had to make sure you were born in that year. That was sobering. But you had to say something that was going on in that year in your life. And so we got to know, and I've known these people for 3 or 4 years, and I found out stories I didn't know, right? That's how we get to know each other. We ask curious questions without knowing the answer. And so how like the queen we can be, I think, at times, right? We look into a mirror, we seek the truth, but not with an openness to surprising or mysterious answers, because who asks questions that don't know the answer? I know someone who did. And this is one of my favorite stories. I wasn't going to tell this story, but I feel like in light of the world, this is a really helpful story. When I was in my first pastoral calling in Manhattan Beach, California, we did the play, All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten by Robert Fulghum. Who's heard of that? Wonderful. So there is a whole bunch of stories in that, and one story from Fulgham's own life was he was studying Greek language and culture on the island of Crete. Do you guys know this story? So he was at an institute devoted to healing the wounds of war on the location of a former bloody battle during Nazi occupation. So he was in a place where there was formerly a terrible war with Nazi occupation, and he was there learning and studying about what it meant to heal those wounds. His professor was Alexander Papaderos, who was in charge of this institute and the wisest man he'd ever encountered so far as a young man. And he asked, at the end of the session, Robert Fulghum, asked this question. The guy said, "Are there any questions?" And Robert Fulghum, said, "What is the meaning of life?" Because he thought he'd come to a wise person, right? And this is the answer he got. When I was a child, living during World War II, we were very poor and we lived in this remote village. One day on the road, I found the broken pieces of a mirror. A German motorcycle had been wrecked in that place. I tried to find all the pieces and put them back together, but it was not possible to make a whole mirror again. So I simply kept the largest piece. This one, and he held it up. He actually carried it everywhere he went. And by scratching it on stone, I made it round so it wouldn't hurt anything. I began to play with it as a toy because I said we didn't have a whole lot, and I became fascinated by the fact that I could reflect light into dark places where the sun would never shine, in deep holes and crevices and dark closets. It became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible places I could find, right? Can you imagine him doing that? Trying to find the light and get it where it needed to go? He said, I kept this little mirror, and as I became a man, I grew to understand that this was not just a child's game, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light or the source of the light, but light or truth or goodness or whatever you want to call it, understanding, knowledge, is there. And it will only shine in the many dark and inaccessible places if I choose to reflect it. I, he said, am a fragment of a mirror, whose whole design and shape I do not know. I'm part of something greater, but it's just me. Nevertheless, with what I have, I can reflect the light into the dark places of this world, into the dark places, into the dark hearts of men and women, and change some things in some people sometimes. Perhaps others may see and do likewise. This is what I'm all about. This is the meaning of my life. Meaning found in actions of a child rather than in eloquent soliloquies. Meaning found in the goodness of being the person taking charge of finding out where light is not available and making it truth and goodness and beauty go there. Many of us are reading The Tears of Things by Richard Rohr, which is, if you're not, such a great book for these times. In it, he focuses on the overarching themes of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures, particularly related to the prophets. We often pull out singular sentences from those texts, but when we take them in their entirety, the whole of the prophets, right, reading Isaiah from beginning to end, reading Micah from beginning to end, these prophetic books, sometimes we pull little scriptures out and we don't quite get the meaning. He says when you read them in their totality, a pattern emerges. And I think prophets are the ones who hold up mirrors. Prophets are the ones that hold up mirrors to their respective societies, to their religious groups, and basically say, do you see yourself? Do you see what you've become? How have you strayed from God? What have you become? How have you abandoned common decency and goodness but still seem to worship God? How do you sing to God one day but oppress the vulnerable the next day? That is really what the prophets are about in the Old Testament. Prophets hold up that mirror to disrupt the collective narrative of our own self-deception. The pattern that emerges is order. Life, we try to find order in it, right? And then what happens is disorder, which I think we're in a little bit right now, right? Disorder, and then reorder. The cycle of growth and maturity, he calls it. The process of growth is what he calls it, of grace and growth. Perhaps that's what Lent is for, to look at ourselves, but then to hold up the mirror to our collective society. We are living in a world that has not come away from a mirror with a sober reflection or an accurate assessment of our collective sins. But if we as individuals are brave enough to see the truth and not hide from it, we are blessed with holy disruption. We no longer deceive ourselves when we actually take a look. And I think we in the church too often have individualized sin and outsourced community justice to others. When we look in that proverbial mirror, not a literal one, right, but really assess the people, experiences, values, and communities, commitments we have in our lives, who are we in those moments? Mirrors always reveal something about us. It might not always be what we want to see, but it's always instructive and helpful. And what makes a difference, says James in this passage, is entirely in how we react to what we see. We don't control what happens in the mirror. We come to it. We can't necessarily control the image that we see back, but we can control how we react to it, how we change as a result of what we've seen. When we choose instead to look away from what is true, we disconnect from the truth of so many things. And I truly think that's what's going on in the world. We're too often looking at that black mirror, that phone, that iPad, that computer, that TV, and not that any of entertainment is bad, but it helps us sometimes disconnect from ourselves, doesn't it? It makes something else true. It gives someone else for me to blame, right? It gives something else for me to disconnect from my own self. Denial and avoidance, I think, is what James is getting at the heart of our spiritual journey. he's cautioning us against that, a denial that avoids and then disconnects from the whole world. Little moments of denial that become bigger each time we don't address the corrections we need to make. I think denial creates a whole other reality. We don't grow when we minimize or deflect or pretend everything's okay, or focus on other people's sins, which we are really good at doing. No, we learn from the prophets that sin, redemption, and mercy are not merely for us as things as individuals, although they are, but they are for the beloved community. And I think there's something important. Mirrors show us what we have denied, disguised, or hidden within ourselves, within our rules of our religion, right? Mirrors show us collectively and as individuals maybe what we want to deny or disguise or hide away in ourselves. We can lie to yourself, but not to a mirror. It shows you the truth every single time. And I think the only way to make sure that's not us being purposely deceitful during Lent is to take a truly hard look at ourselves, our habits, both spiritual and personal, take inventory of our beliefs. What needs to be challenged? Do I have a belief from childhood that maybe needs to be challenged? What actions can I take to create the world that Jesus wants for me and for all of us? What about my tradition in my faith journey is not helpful anymore? What have we as a church done more harm than good in? Have we cared for the least and the lost? Have we supported leaders who hurt and abuse the vulnerable? Like, looking an assessment of our priorities. I think it's far too easy to intellectually rationalize all kinds of behavior, politics, policies, actions, leaders, churches, all of it, right? Pretending that we're defending Jesus, but we're often defending Jesus as a way to avoid ourselves. I think we need to stop and ask ourselves, are we defending Jesus, or are we trying to become more like Jesus? Because what do we become when we normalize not looking too closely at the ethical or moral or spiritual implications of our thoughts, beliefs, and actions? So Lent is that time to stop, take a long look in the mirror for accountability and for truth. Because the truth, the Bible says, will what? Set us free if we let it. We can't love others when we are actively deceiving ourselves and deceiving them. And we can't live the way of Jesus if we are actively deceiving ourselves. Because the imagery from James is that when someone looks in a mirror and then walks away forgetting what the image held, is someone who has deluded themselves, someone who has left reality behind, someone who is deceiving themselves. You say you are a follower of Jesus, says James, but you lie and abuse others with your words. You are deceiving yourself. So my hope, beloved community, is that as a faith community, we are committed to asking tough questions of ourselves and our traditions without always knowing the answer. So that when we encounter mystery, we are not threatened by it. When we encounter something outside of our experience, we really are open to it, so that our understanding of God expands outward and doesn't shrink and become inward. And so the challenge for us is twofold, and as you know, I rarely do lists, so pay attention. Two things. This Lent, really look in that mirror, proverbial, right? And see what we have become. And see what we need to do to become who Jesus wants us to be. And number two, take the mirror off the wall. Turn it outward to make it useful. To make it useful to find places where light needs to be reflected into. So I would jokingly say that maybe we should say, mirror, mirror off the wall, right? Reflect us, for us the light of all. Ooh. Mirror, mirror off the wall. God, help us reflect light to all. Because we in this room, in this community, are fragments of a mirror. And we can only reflect the light that we allow to hit us where we are and reveal the things about us that are true. We can individually and together reflect light into the hidden and overlooked and dimly lit places of this world. May we be the ones who find meaning in the beauty of reflecting God's light and love in this world. Amen.